This committee heard testimony from a bipartisan group of county clerks in Michigan. One was a Democrat and two were Republicans. They testified that they found no evidence whatsoever of widespread irregularities in this election, and they lauded the municipal clerks and their teams who run elections in Michigan for their tireless effort and commitment to free, fair, and safe elections. Your team has now lost 39 court cases in the aftermath of the election, with judges ruling that there is inadequate evidence to support the sweeping claims that you are making and repeating here tonight, and the unprecedented relief that you are seeking. Yesterday, we learned that U.S. Attorney General William Barr has similarly found no evidence whatsoever of widespread irregularities that are worth investigating. If our local clerks, state and federal judges across the country, and the highest-ranking law enforcement official in the United States cannot find any substance to or any merit in any of your arguments, why should we? Why should we sit here in this show that you are partaking in and taking around the country if no one has found any evidence whatsoever of any of your wrongdoing? And why should we not believe the reported attempts of you to try to seek a pardon from the president?
What was the last part?
That last part is not.
You're attempting to seek a pardon,
election.
so why is this not part of that?
I will ask that he be disciplined for that. First of all,
hold on.
First of all, what he says is untrue. Second, that is a defamation of my professional character. You allow that to happen in your legislature?
As I said,
reported.
As I said, Representative, let's keep it limited to the germane issue here. So, Mr. Giuliani, let me ask
the record.
Question.
We haven't lost 39 cases. We've only brought 3. So you're wrong about that. Second, the reason why people are reaching those conclusions is because, like you, they don't have the discipline, maybe the intelligence, I don't know, to read through this, and to read 20 more like it. You can't tell me there's no evidence when I have a couple of thousand affidavits from people. You can't tell me that your credibility is better than the credibility of those people. They swore under oath. You didn't.
I mean, I would try to do a little narration or give some commentary or explanation, but in this case, I'm just going to let the evidence speak for me.
This video is brought to you by Extreme Tees. Click on the link below. Make sure you put Kevin in the promo code and you'll get a 20% discount.
So I was a poll challenger at the TCF Center on Monday, November 2nd, 3rd, and 4th. On November 4th, early in the morning, I was standing at the adjudication table and a ballot came across the screen. The ballot had a straight party ticket vote for both the Democrat and the Republican. It was a filled-in circle, which is an intentional mark. It's not a dash, it's not a dot. When the ballot came across the screen, there was no other marks. None of the judges and none of the other ballot proposals had been voted on. The poll worker then said, I think I'm going to give it to the Democrats. That's absolutely absurd. That is illegal.
Why should we? Why should we sit here in this show that you are partaking in and taking around the country if no one has found any evidence whatsoever of any of your wrongdoing?
My name's Tony Burson Jr. I'm from Savannah, Georgia. I was a poll observer for the Chatham County area. And when I observed what I observed in the polling area, it was disgusting because nobody was actually checking anything. They were just counting. And when I say counting, I mean they were just taking the ballots and one by one going down. There was no bipartisan overlook. Now, there may have been a few on certain tables, but there was not a clear bipartisan check of these ballots. And that disturbed me because while I was observing, while I had the chance to observe, because I got kicked off the floor, but when I was on the floor, there was nothing that ensured me that the votes were actually being counted correctly.
Why should we? Why should we sit here in this show that you are partaking in and taking around the country if no one has found any evidence whatsoever of any of your wrongdoing?
Then around 4:30 a.m. we had an announcement that a new shipment of ballots were arriving, and these boxes of ballots were brought in by Mr. Baxter himself at 4:30 a.m. from the rear of the room.
What time of the morning was it when you saw this come in? Or what time of the evening was it?
Like you said, 3-ish, 4 in that window.
In the afternoon?
No. I was there from
3 or 4 in the morning.
I was there at 10 p.m. to 5 a.m.
They were in mail sleeves, you said?
Mm-hmm.
Did anybody have any earmarkings of who they were carrying these ballots? Were they carrying them? Were they on a dolly?
Yeah, they were on a dolly. Do I know who they were? Absolutely not.
So I witnessed Mr. Baxter carrying boxes from the rear of the basement of the TCF Center into the tables. So each box, I approximate 600 ballots. And it was like a full, what you have to know is that these tables, there's about 7 tables. They were 10-foot tables each. Every table was full of boxes of ballots. It's not tens of thousands or 20,000s. I approximate 50,000 ballots were brought in. Now, were all of those ballots brought in from the rear entrance to the TCF Center? I don't know. They were brought in from the TCF Center, but there was a lot more than just the ones that were brought in from the rear entrance to the TCF Center. And I'm talking, this is the 6 a.m. This is when we're starting at 6 a.m. 4:30, 5 a.m. It was 50,000 ballots on the table.
Was there any particular reason you didn't ask for a supervisor to question, the ballots coming in on a dolly? Or?
Well, I didn't figure I needed to because the lead counsel that was supposed to be there was taking tally, and I was there standing right next to him. So I figured he was kind of the person that was overseeing the whole night. That's what we were told.
The boxes were brought in from the rear around 4:30. Then they had the shift change from around 5 to 6.
No, we were talking directly about why are these coming in. We all thought it was interesting that these ballots were coming in so late.
So with the shift change, most of the volunteers were tired at this point. They only expected to be there from 10 p.m. to 5 a.m.
But we were definitely perplexed that these were coming in so late, as well as they were being put out to be counted.
90+% of them left at 5 a.m. I decided to stick around. So they had the shift change. At 6 a.m., Mr. Baxter and his management team got back on the microphone and said, this is what the new shift change, right? The new employees says, this is what democracy is supposed to look like. Right in front of everyone, the whole room cheered.
Why should we sit here in this show that you are partaking in and taking around the country if no one has found any evidence whatsoever of any of your wrongdoing?
This one, when you said the 6-foot rule, we were in fact given a paper with these rules saying that we can break the 6-foot rule when we have to challenge a ballot. We even had the printed paper with us, and when we would show it to the supervisor, he'd say, we are enforcing the rules that we were given. That's the rule your team that sent you gave you. We don't have to abide by it because that does not apply to us.
Why should we sit here in this show that you are partaking in and taking around the country if no one has found any evidence whatsoever of any of your wrongdoing?
We want all the Republican challengers out of this room.
Why should we sit here in this show that you are partaking in and taking around the country if no one has found any evidence whatsoever of any of your wrongdoing?
Evidence of election fraud mounts as the mainstream media and Democrats loudly insist Joe Biden is still the 2020 winner. However, numerous whistleblowers are coming forward with credible information that hundreds of thousands of votes for President Trump mysteriously disappeared on election night. On Tuesday, Jesse Morgan, a worker for the U.S. Postal Service, revealed that his trailer full of ballots simply went missing after he dropped them off. The worker drove his truck from Bethpage, New York, all the way to Lancaster, Pennsylvania, and says he was carrying some 288,000 completed mail-in ballots.
Why should we sit here in this show that you are partaking in and taking around the country if no one has found any evidence whatsoever of any of your wrongdoing?
While the missing truck full of ballots is bad enough, other whistleblowers say they drove thousands of pre-filled ballots right over state lines, which is a federal crime.
Why should we sit here in this show that you are partaking in and taking around the country if no one has found any evidence whatsoever of any of your wrongdoing?
A subcontractor for the post office, Nathan Pease, said that he was told by two separate postal workers that the post office in Wisconsin had collected and backdated over 100,000 ballots on the morning after the election.
Why should we sit here in this show that you are partaking in and taking around the country if no one has found any evidence whatsoever of any of your wrongdoing?
Unsurprisingly, others also claimed the integrity of Dominion voting machines has been compromised and cannot be trusted. During a press conference in Arlington, Virginia on Tuesday, the project explained that election officials in blue jurisdictions have failed to maintain the ballot chain of custody, which leaves the door wide open for voting fraud. The project said it has photographic evidence of people improperly accessing voting machines and eyewitness accounts on how the seals on ballot hard drives were illegally tampered with and broken. Klein says that in total, there are over 300,000 fraudulent ballots in Arizona, 548,000 in Michigan, 204,000 in Georgia, and 121,000 in Pennsylvania.
We have two.
Why should we sit here in this show that you are partaking in and taking around the country if no one has found any evidence whatsoever of any of your wrongdoing?
Few observers there that are going to show up, not at this point, this is in the morning, as you can see the daylight. They're going to get there at about 8 o'clock to watch the tabulation of absentee and military ballots. But according to their affidavits, at about 10 o'clock, there was one person working the polls who told everyone in the room to leave on the basis they were going to stop counting and return at 8:30 in the morning. So according to the witnesses, the Republican observers, there's a lady who has blonde braids who comes out to announce we're going to stop counting. Everyone go home. And in fact, we see that. What happens is everyone clears out, including the Republican observers and the press, but 4 people stay behind and continue counting and tabulating well into the night from that point, which is going to be about 10:25 when they all clear out, or 10:30. And they will continue counting unobserved, unsupervised, not in public view as your statute requires, until about 1 in the morning.
Why should we sit here in this show that you are partaking in and taking around the country if no one has found any evidence whatsoever of any of your wrongdoing?
The reason we know this is because when our Republican observers were forced to leave, they went to the Central Tabulation Center and they got word from a news crew that in fact counting had continued. They have information that not everybody left according to plan, and some people stayed behind. So this shocked them, so they returned back to State Farm Arena at about 1 o'clock in the morning, where they confirmed that in fact people had just left.
Why should we sit here in this show that you are partaking in and taking around the country if no one has found any evidence whatsoever of any of your wrongdoing?
So here you see it's all cleared out. We just went from 10:25 to 10:37. The place is a ghost town. This is where the people were vacated and told, go home, come back at 8:30. We will now stop working and stop counting. But notice who stays behind. You have 4 people, consistent with our affidavits, who stayed behind. And so you'll see the lady in purple. You'll see 2 women in yellow in the back, which is where the scanners are there at the top right frame. And then the lady with the blonde braids also, who told everyone to leave. Those are the 4 people who will stay behind. The Republican observers said they were the last people to leave State Farm Arena, along with the Fox News crew, accepting those 4 people. So what you're going to see, look at the ladies in yellow. You'll see that they will begin just sitting still, doing nothing, ostensibly not working, because after all, they said they're going to stop counting. They will wait until the witnesses over there in that roped off area, the press and the observers, leave the room. Then you'll see them move into action and begin scanning ballots.
Why should we sit here in this show that you are partaking in and taking around the country if no one has found any evidence whatsoever of any of your wrongdoing?
Okay, so what you're going to see happen at about 11 o'clock is, once everyone is gone, coast is clear, they are going to pull ballots out from underneath a table.
Why should we sit here in this show that you are partaking in and taking around the country if no one has found any evidence whatsoever of any of your wrongdoing?
We did not know when we first watched this, okay, is it normal to store suitcases of ballots under a table, under a tablecloth? Is that how they run the place? Maybe this is what they've been doing all day. Maybe this is what they're doing under all the tables. So we went back and watched the video. It was a team of us. We don't see that. What we see is typically you're going to find ballots, back in this corner, or coming in through a door, and then they get moved and circulated throughout the room. And it can get a little confusing because they have these black containers of ballots. They have the U.S. Postal Service containers. But what we were trying to do when we determined that there were ballots being pulled out from underneath this table is, what was the chain of custody? Where did they come from? Who put them there? When did they put them there? At about 8 o'clock in the morning, and we're going to roll this back and show it to you. There you go. So now they're going to start pulling these ballots out from under this table. This table, the black one, was placed there by the lady with the blonde braids at about 8:22 a.m. in the morning. So she put that table there. So the same person who's staying behind now, the same person who cleared the place out under the pretense that we're going to stop counting, is the person who put the table there.
Why should we sit here in this show that you are partaking in and taking around the country if no one has found any evidence whatsoever of any of your wrongdoing?
At 8:22 in the morning. Yeah, I saw 4 suitcases come out from underneath the table. So what are these ballots doing there, separate from all the other ballots? And why are they only counting them whenever the place is cleared out with no witnesses?
Why should we sit here in this show that you are partaking in and taking around the country if no one has found any evidence whatsoever of any of your wrongdoing?
So these machines can process about 3,000 ballots an hour. You have multiple machines there, and they're there for 2 hours. So you do the math. How many ballots went through those machines in those 2 hours when there was no one there to supervise, to be present, consistent with your statutes and rules, to supervise the tabulation? We believe that could easily be, and probably is certainly, beyond the margin of victory in this race. Because if it's only 3 scanners working for 2 hours, right, that's 18,000 ballots that went through. There were, in addition to the 4 workers that you see there were 2 other people who were bringing ballots in and out. That's 6 total people. And so if we were to sit here for the next 2 hours, what we would see is that this operation just goes on and on and on.
Why should we sit here in this show that you are partaking in and taking around the country if no one has found any evidence whatsoever of any of your wrongdoing?
They're scanning until about 12:55 in the morning. So we kept the video running. And, we can show you the people who gave us the affidavits reappearing at that time, just as they said, around 1 a.m. to find out, are they in fact counting after they told us they would stop working or not?
Why should we sit here in this show that you are partaking in and taking around the country if no one has found any evidence whatsoever of any of your wrongdoing?
Hello, this is Mary Kemper with Voter Integrity Fund. May I please speak to Charles?
With this, who are you with?
Voter Integrity Fund. Charles Mart's in the state of Arizona and is having requested an absentee ballot. Did you request an absentee ballot?
Absolutely did not.
No. Okay, and did you? Okay, no. Okay, somebody from our team will follow up with you, and can you please give us the best phone number? Is it this?
So I'll play for you the second example.
Hello? Hello?
Hi.
Hi, is this Zofa?
Yes.
Hi, my name is Taj. I'm with the Voter Integrity Fund. In the state of Arizona, it said that you requested the absentee ballot. I'm just making sure that you requested that ballot.
No, I did not request an absentee ballot.
Okay, somebody from our team will follow up with you. Is this a good number to follow back up with you on?
Yes.
Why should we sit here in this show that you are partaking in and taking around the country if no one has found any evidence whatsoever of any of your wrongdoing? Why should we sit here in this show that you are partaking in and taking around the country if no one has found any evidence whatsoever of any of your wrongdoing?
I kept looking at the screen because it seemed very odd. And in the bottom right-hand corner was a yellow banner. And I got into a position where I could see the yellow banner, which said low confidence. Then I started paying much closer attention to the signatures, thinking this didn't even make sense to me because the signature on the ballot that was being compared to other signatures didn't even resemble in any way what they were comparing it to. They were completely illegible. They were just scribbles on the ballot. And there were 5 screeners screening low confidence ballots for an entire afternoon that I was in there. And I asked Celia what the low confidence said, and she said just not to worry about that, that this was a new program that they were testing.
Why should we sit here in this show that you are partaking in and taking around the country if no one has found any evidence whatsoever of any of your wrongdoing?
My only concern is the handling of the ballots, which makes them ineligible to go through the machine correctly. But it's the room before me and the room after me it's a concern. I don't get to see.
Well, let me ask you about that. So a certain number of ballots were now put aside as duplicates.
Yes.
Duplicates means that they had a problem.
Yes, that they have to be duplicated.
Right.
So
it didn't mean there were 2 ballots.
Right. That's what
Duplicates
they called
can
them.
sound like 2 ballots. What
Right.
it meant was there's something wrong with it, and therefore we may have to duplicate it.
Yes, and that's the room that I was originally
And they were put aside.
put aside,
And they
taken
were brought
out.
into another room, and
2 people.
you were not allowed to go in there.
No, I was not allowed to go back there.
So you were cut off from that also.
Yes, I was specifically
You were cut off from
taken out.
observing the problem ballots.
Yes, I was specifically taken out of that room, ushered out, and brought into this room, which really was just the room, as I explained.
And how many could you estimate that is?
Each table would have an average of, I would say maybe 1/16 of the pile. So, let's say an average of maybe 10 to 20 ballots. But by the time I left, these bins were filled. They would fill them. They would go correct them or whatever it is that they did and brought them back.
Best estimate.
I would say my guess would be close to in the day that I was there, just in 5 hours, maybe 2,000 ballots.
Okay.
Why should we sit here in this show that you are partaking in and taking around the country if no one has found any evidence whatsoever of any of your wrongdoing?
Not one of the military ballots was a registered voter.
And the ballots looked like they were all exactly the same Xerox copies of the ballot. They were all for Biden across the board. There wasn't a single Trump vote, and none of the voters were registered. They had to manually enter the names and addresses and a birth date of 1/1/2020, which would override the system and allow them to enter non-registered voters, of which I saw several that day. Throughout the day, that's how they would override voters that were neither in the electronic poll book or the supplemental updated poll book.
Thank you. Why should we sit here in this show that you are partaking in and taking around the country if no one has found any evidence whatsoever of any of your wrongdoing?
One of the things we saw out in the field was that people, quite a few people had done mail-in ballots. So they came in and they hadn't been updated in the Delaware County database yet. So they would come in and say, the database is not showing me on the database, I'd like to vote. So the process, one of the processes was to give them a provisional ballot. And then they would vote provisionally, and then later on their vote would be sorted out. That didn't happen. I observed, and the gentleman that was with me observed 7 different polls where the people were given a regular ballot. So they cast a vote and put it in. We let it happen a few times. We didn't jump all over them. It happened a couple of times. We went up. In all cases, the election judges were very forthcoming, very polite. They apologized and they said they couldn't do it. But that somewhat spurred me to go down to the counting center, which Leah described. It's on the Seaport Ave. It's a remote building, not much around it. And I wanted to take a look. All day long, I had been told that there were 10 to 20 GOP poll watchers down there and that everything was well in hand. And out of curiosity, I decided to go down. I arrived at 6 o'clock with 4 other gentlemen, again, former military and some good citizens from Delaware County. And we weren't allowed to get in until 11 o'clock at night, and we had to get some legal help to get us in.
Why should we sit here in this show that you are partaking in and taking around the country if no one has found any evidence whatsoever of any of your wrongdoing?
So it took us 5 hours to get upstairs. After that, what we saw here is, what I saw is I really think the crux of this in Delaware County is, as an expert in this, I think it's impossible to verify the validity of about 100,000 to 120,000 votes. Now, Delaware County's got 425,000 registered voters. Approximately 300,000 of them voted. I don't know what the exact number ended up. Mayor Giuliani nailed that number. But of that number, over 100,000 are in question in my mind. What I saw as a forensics expert was an election process that was forensically destructive in the manner it was conducted, with the envelopes being separated from the ballots and gone to the other side of the room. And the problem with that from being forensically destructive is that when you go to do a recount, okay, the machines did a pretty good job of recounting. So if I have 120,000 ballots, mail-in ballots at one side of the room and envelopes at the other side of the room, it's still going to come out 102,000 votes for Vice President Biden and 18,000 votes for President Trump. I don't care how many times you recount those votes, the ballot's going to come out the same every time.
Why should we sit here in this show that you are partaking in and taking around the country if no one has found any evidence whatsoever of any of your wrongdoing?
So the notion of a recount in a forensically destructive process doesn't work very well. What I saw there was a chain of custody in all cases that was broken. It was broken for the mail-in ballots, the Dropbox ballots, the election day USB V-card flash drives. In all cases, the chain of custody and the procedures that were defined by the Delaware County Board of Elections and Election Process Review they didn't follow one. I couldn't even redline this multi-page document because the entire document would be, they didn't follow any of the procedures.
Why should we sit here in this show that you are partaking in and taking around the country if no one has found any evidence whatsoever of any of your wrongdoing?
So I personally observed USB cards being uploaded to the voting machines by the voting machine warehouse supervisor on multiple occasions. I saw this personally. I brought it to the attention of the deputy sheriff who was there stationed, who was a senior law enforcement officer, and I brought it to the attention of the clerk of elections. I brought it to their attention. I objected, and I said, this person is not being observed. He's not part of the process that I can see, and he's walking in with baggies, which we have pictures of, and it was submitted in our affidavits, and he was sticking these USBs into the machines. So I personally witnessed that happened 24 times, over 24 times. We have multiple other witnesses that saw it, including Democrat poll watchers. And we were told, I was told the next day by the solicitors, well, actually not the solicitor, but the attorney that we had secured, that they said every election they leave a couple of USBs in the voting machines and they're brought back, and generally the warehouse manager comes over and puts them in. So in talking to the U.S. Attorney General McSwain and other law enforcement officers, I found out that was not the case, that generally, more than two is unusual. So they denied they did it, but as of today, 47 USB cards are missing, and they're nowhere to be found. So I was told personally that these 24 to 30 cards that were uploaded weren't there. Those cards, I demanded that they didn't update the vote live time. They only updated it about once every 2 or 3 hours. I demanded they uploaded the vote so I could see what the result was, and it was 50,000 votes. And I think as a computer scientist, an American, and a patriot, it doesn't matter who those 50,000 votes were. I'll tell you they were for Vice President Biden. But what was shocking to me as an American, as someone who has gone to sea, gone to war, that that could even happen. So several other things that came up was on Thursday, it took us 3 days for them to obey the court order that I secured with Leah's help and the help of the Thomas More Society, who we thank incredibly good patriots. They got us in there. They got the order for us to get in and watch it, look at the back offices, which were locked for 5 minutes every 2 hours. I went in. I was the first one allowed to go in at 1:30 on Thursday, and then again at 3:30 for 5 minutes. The county solicitor had a stopwatch. On the first time, I was not allowed to touch anything. The second time, I did. What I observed in the locked room in the back office was 70,000 unopened mail-in ballots. They were in boxes of 500, stacked in neatly. The gentleman that came in with me was a Democrat poll watcher, is a forensic pathologist, a very detailed, very dedicated man, and he took meticulous notes as well. And I verified with him, are you seeing what I'm seeing? We both agreed as GOP poll watchers and a Democrat poll watcher that we had witnessed 60 to 70,000. We had a little bit of a disagreement there. The problem with that was by that time, the mail-in ballots had already been counted. So 120,000 mail-in ballots had already been counted, posted, and done. So my question is, where did the 70,000 ballots go? And nobody knows. We have a picture in here of a large number of boxes that I took that were filled with what appeared to be ballots sitting by the Blue Crest machine. They were there for about 3 hours and then they disappeared. I thought it notable when I watched it, when they were taking the ballots up and down. I said, I am an expert in fraud. I saw the ballots going up multiple elevators and racks. And I think a lot of well-meaning people and a lot of honest people were there doing that. They were trying to participate in the process. And I would say that 99% of the people there, the way the process was designed, I believe that people thought it was a non-fraudulent process. I heard that said many times. I was, I said, there's no fraud going on here. I said, well, I'm not, I didn't even bring that up. But I think people saw what they wanted to see, and they saw what was intended for them to see. I called it at one point Kabuki theater. I said it was all designed for us to see it. It was entertaining. There were cameras on it. When we finally got into the back room where the votes were being ingested, as a data scientist, I want to see where the data is coming in. And I wanted to know the universe of the votes. Well, the universe of the votes was only supposed to be 120,000 mail-in ballots. We were told there were 6,000 ballots remaining. So I said, okay, we have a universe of 126,000 votes. And then when I get back there, the universe wasn't 126,000 votes. The universe was 200,000 votes. So that's a problem. I think the last thing I wanted, a couple of other things, is the Blue Crest sorter machine was only manned by one person. People ask me all the time, how do people commit crimes? I know there's a lot of theories here, and I always look for the simplest thing. People that stuff, sticking USB sticks in, putting ballots in. Very simple thing, only takes a couple of people. Doesn't take a big conspiracy. I think people look at things and they use inflammatory words and, like fraud and so forth. As a forensic computer scientist, my interest is in the data. Where did it go? Where did the spoilage go? How did the data come in and go out of the system? So I think as a scientist, we need to look at that. We need to audit that. What was really upsetting to me, and the most upsetting, was I had spoke to multiple law enforcement agencies and literally begged multiple law enforcement agencies. I said, go in, and I said, in order to prove that nothing's happening, and either exonerate yourselves in the process or refute what I'm saying, please. It's a very simple process. Just go get the forensic evidence from the computers. It's a simple process. You turn the computer off. It's non-destructive, takes moments, maybe half an hour, 20 minutes to do it properly and collect the evidence. You open the computer up, you take a device called a bit blocker, you put it in the hard drive. It's done under the observation of law enforcement officers. They take a forensic image of the drive, put it all back together. It wouldn't have taken more than an hour to image all 5 machines. That was never done, despite my objections, and that was 3 weeks ago. Lastly, when they said, well, we've got all the forensic records and so forth. We just learned 2 days ago that virtually all chain of custody logs, records, yellow sheets, everything was gone. All forensic evidence, all custody sheets in Delaware County are gone. They had a signing party where they sat down, and poll workers were invited back to recreate those logs, and our understanding as of today was that they were unsuccessful in getting them all. So we have a situation where we have 100,000 ballots to 120,000 ballots, both mail-in and USB, that are in question. Now, there's no cure for this. There's no remedy for this. As a home charter, we could have a re-election in Delaware County for our own representatives within our own town, but there is no cure for that for the President of the United States. And I believe, as a citizen and an observer to this, that anybody could certify that vote in any good conscience. And if the Democrats that have a part of this process, had done things, followed their own procedures, which they created almost unilaterally, we would be in a situation where they could exonerate themselves and they could say, Mr. Stenstrom, you've been misinformed. We have evidence here that refutes what you say. But that's not the case. They can't do that. So I say, if you can't certify that vote, and you can't certify 100,000 votes out of 300,000, then you can't certify Delaware County. And I'm done, and thank you for your time and patience.
Why should we? Why should we sit here in this show that you are partaking in and taking around the country if no one has found any evidence whatsoever of any of your wrongdoing?
Just want to say thanks for checking out the video. Please check out KC Uncensored, my personal site, where you'll get uncensored material from me along with some archives. check out Extreme Teas, my sponsor. The link is below this video. If you click on it and put Kevin in the promo code, you'll get a 20% discount. And finally, don't forget to hit like, share, subscribe, and hit the notification button. And if you would like to donate to Kevin and Kevin's Corner, there's links below this video to do that as well. Okay, God bless you and God bless America. Take care.